few winters ago, I thought I'd finally found peace. I had just finalized a really tough divorce, and all I wanted was to get away from everything. My girlfriend at the time, Christina, and I decided to book this beautiful, modern cabin right on a lake in upstate New York. The pictures looked perfect, no neighbors, no noise, just total silence and a blanket of snow. It was exactly what I needed. We drove up on a Friday afternoon, and the place was even better than we'd imagined. The air was crisp, the snow was pristine, and the quiet was almost deafening. As we walked up to the front door, we noticed a small, brown paper package sitting on the porch mat. There was no return address, no name, just a simple, handwritten note attached that said, "Enjoy your stay. Stay warm." We were a little puzzled, but figured it was just a quirky welcome gift from the owner. Inside, we found a small, old-fashioned box of matches. It was a bit strange, but we didn't think much of it and brought it inside. The first 2 days were absolute bliss. We spent our time reading by the crackling fireplace, taking long, quiet walks in the woods, and just enjoying the feeling of being completely disconnected from the world. The cabin was our little sanctuary. We cooked, we talked, we watched the snow fall. It was the calm I had been desperately searching for. For a moment, I felt like all the stress and heartache of the past year was finally melting away. But that feeling of peace shattered on the third night. It was just past midnight. I was sound asleep when a faint mechanical sound pulled me from my dreams. It wasn't the wind howling or the house settling. This was different. It was a rhythmic, deliberate hum coming from somewhere outside. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, but the sound persisted, steady and unnerving. I slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Christina, and tiptoed to the large window that overlooked the frozen lake. My heart immediately started pounding. Out in the vast darkness, cutting through the falling snow, were two bright headlights. They were moving slowly, methodically, across the surface of the frozen lake. It was a snowmobile. It wasn't just passing by. It came to a dead stop right in the middle of the ice, directly in front of our cabin. The engine cut out, and the world went silent again, except for the soft hiss of the snow. Then a figure climbed off the snowmobile. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could see them turn and face our cabin. They just stood there for what felt like an eternity, a dark silhouette against the white landscape. And then they started waving. Not a frantic wave, but a slow, deliberate motion. My first thought was that someone was in trouble. Maybe they were lost, or their snowmobile had broken down in the middle of this freezing night. I shook Christina awake. "Christina, wake up. There's someone outside on the lake." She was groggy, but the urgency in my voice snapped her awake. We both crept to the window and peered out. The figure was still there, waving. Couldn't just leave someone out there in the cold, so we decided to step out onto the deck to see if we could hear what was going on. We bundled up in our coats and carefully opened the sliding glass door. A blast of icy air hit us. As we stood on the deck, a voice drifted across the frozen expanse. It was a woman's voice, faint but clear, echoing eerily in the silent night. "Help!" she cried out. "My son, I can't find my son." My blood ran cold, a lost child out here in this weather. It was a parent's worst nightmare. I was about to shout back, to tell her we'd call for help, but then something felt incredibly wrong. The woman had stopped waving. She was standing perfectly still now, her posture calm, almost relaxed. There was no panic in her stance, no desperation. She was just staring directly at our cabin, a silent sentinel in the storm. The shift was so sudden, so unnatural, it sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Christina grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "What is she doing?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the woman's voice cut through the wind again. But this time, it wasn't a cry for help. Her tone was completely different. It was calm, measured, and deliberate. It carried a chilling intimacy, as if she were standing right next to us. And what she said made every hair on my body stand on end. She called out, "Did you get the matches?" Matches? The word hung in the air, sharp and terrifying. The matches. The ones from the strange anonymous package on our porch. The ones with the note that said, "Stay warm." How could she possibly know about them? Christina and I just stood there, completely frozen, unable to speak or move. Our minds were racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Who was this woman? How did she know we were here? How did she know about that specific strange gift? Before we could process any of it, the woman turned around with the same unsettling calmness. She climbed back onto her snowmobile, started the engine, and rode off into the darkness, disappearing into the swirling snow as if she were never there. The sound of the engine faded, leaving us alone again in the profound, terrifying silence. Locked every door and window, and immediately called the police. It took them nearly an hour to arrive, navigating the treacherous snow-covered roads. We told them everything: the snowmobile, the woman, her desperate cry for help that turned into that bizarre, chilling question. The officer listened patiently, but he was skeptical. He and his partner searched the entire area. They walked the perimeter of the lake, they checked the roads, they shone their flashlights across the frozen surface. They found nothing. Absolutely nothing. There were no tracks from a snowmobile on the lake. No footprints in the fresh snow around the shore other than our own. The officer came back and told us that as far as they could tell, no one had been out there. He added that we were the only people staying anywhere near the lake for miles around. The closest occupied house was over on the other side of the mountain. We left that cabin first thing the next morning. We didn't even finish our coffee. We just packed our bags in a panic and got out of there as fast as we could. We never went back. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. Was she a ghost? A local prankster with an incredibly elaborate and cruel sense of humor? Or something else entirely? I still have nightmares about her calm, deliberate voice echoing across the snow, and I'm still haunted by that one simple question. How did she know we were there? And why did she leave us that strange, terrifying gift? Thanks for listening to my story. It's one that I've kept to myself for a long time, but I felt like I needed to share it. If you have any similar unexplained experiences, I'd love to read about them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, my family owns this little lake house up in Northern California. It's not fancy, but it's special to us. It's been passed down for generations, filled with my grandparents' old furniture, the kind of stuff that has a story in every scratch. It's a place that's supposed to feel like home, safe. A few years ago, my parents decided to rent it out. They found a retired craftsman, an older veteran who restored antiques. He seemed perfect, quiet, polite, and genuinely grateful for a peaceful place to live. The locals, like the landscapers who came by, mentioned he was a bit of a loner. He'd just sit on the porch for hours, sometimes staring at the lake, other times just staring. But we figured he was just enjoying his retirement. When his lease was up, my parents told him they needed the house back for some maintenance work. He was completely understanding, packed up his things, and moved out without any issue. I didn't think twice about it. Life went on. About a year later, my sister graduated from college, and we decided to celebrate the way our family always does, a week-long trip to the lake house. We were all excited, picturing swimming, barbecues, and just relaxing. But the moment we pulled up the driveway, something felt off. The air was thick and still, heavy, almost like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us. We tried to shake off the weird feeling, so we were unpacking our dog. Bear started acting strange. Bear's a big, goofy golden retriever, usually super chill. But he kept pacing back and forth near the attic stairs, letting out these low, soft growls. He'd just stand there, staring up at the ceiling. We thought maybe he was just anxious in a new place, even though he'd been there before. That evening, we decided to go out for a celebratory dinner at a local restaurant. We left Bear inside the house, figuring he'd settle down. When we got back a couple of hours later, the house was dark and silent. But as soon as we opened the door, we found a bear. He was huddled at the bottom of the attic ladder, not growling anymore, just whining and trembling, absolutely terrified. My dad called his name, but he wouldn't move. Bounce. That's when my dad noticed it. The pull-down ladder for the attic was slightly ajar. Just a crack, but it wasn't like that when we left. His face went pale, grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and told us to stay put. My heart was pounding. I remember standing there with my mom and sister, just listening to the creak of the old wooden ladder as he climbed up. He pushed the attic hatch open and shined the light inside. He was quiet for a long moment, too long. Then we heard him whisper, "Oh my God." He came down the ladder slowly, his eyes wide. He told us what he saw. Tucked away in a dark corner of the attic, there was a makeshift bed, a pile of old blankets and pillows. Next to it was an old thermos, a few empty cans of food, and a candle that had been burned halfway down. Someone had been living in our attic. The realization washed over us like ice water. We were all standing in the living room, looking at each other, the silence broken only by Bear's whimpers. Every little creak and groan of the old house suddenly sounded like a threat. We checked every room, every closet, under every bed, but there was no one else in the house. The doors and windows were locked just as we had left them. Whoever had been up there was gone. But for how long had they been there? The thought was terrifying. Had they been there when we arrived? Were they watching us unpack? Listening to us talk? Were they in the attic right above our heads while we were making plans for dinner? We didn't sleep a wink that night. The celebratory trip was over before it began. The next morning, the very first thing we did was call a locksmith to change every single lock on the house. We packed our bags in a hurry, the feeling of being watched never leaving us. That familiar, comforting house now felt like a stranger's territory. As we were leaving, we ran into one of our neighbors. We told them what happened, and their face dropped. They said they thought they'd seen something a few weeks before we arrived. A flicker of light, like from a flashlight in the attic window late one night. They'd dismissed it, thinking it was just a reflection. We never found out who it was. Police checked it out, but there was nothing to go on. Was it a stranger? Or was it the quiet, polite tenant who knew the house inside and out? The man who used to sit and stare for hours? We don't know. We can only guess. It still bothers me to this day. The thought of someone secretly living in the shadows of our family home, a place that was supposed to be our sanctuary. It's not just the fear of the unknown person, it's the violation of it. Knowing someone was there, listening, watching, turning our safe space into their hiding place. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't monsters in the dark, but the secrets hidden right above your head. We still own the lake house, but it's never felt the same. Every time I go back, I can't help but glance up at the attic, wondering. Have you ever had that feeling, that prickly sensation on the back of your neck that tells you something is deeply, fundamentally wrong? I have, and I wish I'd listened to it sooner. Last summer, my friend James invited me to his family's lake house. Now, when I say lake house, don't picture a cozy little cabin. This place was huge, almost a mansion, nestled deep in the woods. The best part? Seclusion, no neighbors for miles, just the serene, glassy water and a chorus of crickets at night. It was the perfect escape, or so we thought. One evening, after a long day of swimming, James and I were just chilling on the dock, watching the sunset paint the sky. The air was still, the water was like black glass, and the first stars were beginning to appear. That's when I saw it, across the vast expanse of the lake, a light. It was a single, rhythmic flash. "Hey, check that out," I said, pointing. "Is that a boat?" James squinted. The light flashed again, then again. It wasn't random. It had a pattern. 3 short flashes, 3 long ones, then 3 short ones again. My blood ran cold. Even I knew what that meant. "That's SOS," James whispered, his voice barely audible over the lapping water. We stared, frozen, as the universal signal for distress repeated itself. It was desperate, urgent. Who could be out there? The house on that side of the lake had been deserted for as long as James could remember. We watched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The light vanished. The shore across the lake was plunged back into total darkness. No sound followed, no shouts for help, no engine starting, nothing. Just an unnerving, profound silence that was somehow louder than the signal had been. My mind was racing. Was it a prank? A malfunction? Or was someone genuinely in trouble? We waited, our eyes glued to the opposite shore, but the darkness remained unbroken. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. "We have to go check," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "What if someone's hurt?" James was hesitant, and honestly, so was I. The smart thing to do would have been to call the police. But we were young, a little reckless, and fueled by a potent mix of adrenaline and a hero complex. The thought of someone needing help right there was too much to ignore. "All right," he finally agreed, his jaw set. "Let's take the kayak. It's quieter than the motorboat." The decision was made. We grabbed our flashlights and pushed the small 2-person kayak into the cold, dark water. Every paddle stroke felt amplified in the stillness of the night. The moon was just a sliver, offering little light, and the water beneath us was an inky abyss. The farther we got from our own dock, the more the unease grew in the pit of my stomach. That primal feeling was back, screaming at me to turn around. As we approached the other side, the silhouette of the abandoned house loomed against the tree line. It was even more derelict up close. The dock was collapsing into the water, its planks rotten and skeletal. The yard was a jungle of overgrown weeds and tall grass that rustled ominously in the slight breeze. No lights were on. The place looked like it hadn't seen a living soul in decades. We carefully beached the kayak and stepped onto the marshy ground. The air here was different, stale and heavy, with the smell of decay and damp earth. Using our flashlights, we picked our way through the tangled yard towards the house. The windows were dark, gaping voids, like vacant eyes. Except for one, an upstairs window was slightly ajar. The same window, we realized, that was directly in line with where we'd seen the light. "Hello?" James called out, his voice sounding small and weak against the vast silence. "Is anyone here? We saw your light." Only the echo of his own voice answered. Against my better judgment, we found a low section of the porch that hadn't completely rotted away and hoisted ourselves up. The front door was locked, but a window beside it had its glass shattered. It was a clear, albeit unsettling, invitation. We climbed through the crunch of broken glass under our boots echoing through the empty structure. Inside, it was a time capsule of neglect. The air was thick with dust that danced in the beams of our flashlights. Cobwebs draped every corner like funeral shrouds. The furniture was gone, leaving only ghostly outlines in the dust on the floor. Every creak of the floorboards under our feet seemed to scream our presence into the oppressive quiet. "This place has been empty for years," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "Who could have been signaling from here?" We moved from the living room to what was once a kitchen, our lights cutting through the gloom. Nothing, just more dust, more decay. The source of the light had to be upstairs. Drawn by a morbid curiosity that had now completely overpowered our common sense, we started up the main staircase. The steps groaned in protest with every footfall, a symphony of decay. Upstairs was a long, dark hallway with several doors leading off it. We checked the first room empty. The second, also empty. The third door, at the very end of the hall, was the one with the open window facing the lake. This had to be it. Taking a deep breath, we pushed the door open. The room was just as bare as the rest of the house, except for one object. Sitting on a dusty old crate, positioned directly in front of the open window, was an old-fashioned film projector. The kind you see in black and white movies. It was aimed perfectly across the lake, right at James's house, and the power switch was still in the on position, clicked into place. A horrifying, impossible realization. The light we saw, the SOS, wasn't a flashlight. It was this projector. Someone had set it up, maybe with a strip of film that blocked and unblocked the light to create the pattern. The blinking hadn't been a person. It had been a machine. But why? And more importantly, who? Who would do this? And then we heard it. A sound from the other end of the upstairs hallway. Behind us. The soft, deliberate creak of a floorboard. The unmistakable sound of a single footstep. We froze, our hearts hammering against our ribs. Every horror movie trope I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. We weren't alone. We were never alone. Slowly, agonizingly, we turned around. Our flashlight beams sliced through the darkness of the hallway, shaking in our trembling hands. We expected to see a figure, a face, anything. There was nothing. The hallway was as empty as it had been moments before. But the feeling, the air was electric. That feeling of being watched was no longer a subtle prickle. It was a crushing weight. The presence was there. We couldn't see it, but we could feel it. Close. Very close. That's when our survival instincts finally kicked in. We didn't scream. We didn't even speak. We just ran. We bolted out of that room, down the groaning staircase, not caring how much noise we made. We scrambled back out the broken window, tumbled off the porch, and sprinted through the overgrown yard. We threw the kayak into the water and paddled like our lives depended on it because, in that moment, we truly believed they did. I didn't dare look back until we were halfway across the lake. When I finally did, my heart stopped. A light had just flickered on in that upstairs window, faint but unmistakable. 3 short flashes. 3 long flashes. 3 short flashes, then darkness. The next morning, still shaken, we called the police. We told them everything. They were skeptical, but they went to check it out. They called us back a few hours later. The officer sounded bored. He said the property was secure and had been vacant for at least 20 years. They confirmed our story about the projector in the upstairs room, aimed out the window. But he said there was one detail we must have gotten wrong. One impossible detail. The projector had no film in it. More chillingly, there was no power source. The house's electricity had been cut off for decades, and there were no batteries, no generator, nothing. He said it was physically impossible for that projector to have ever turned on. I don't know what we saw that night. I don't know who or what was in that house with us. But sometimes when I'm near a quiet lake at dusk, I still feel it. That cold, heavy feeling of being watched from across the water, and I can't help but wonder if, somewhere out there in the darkness, a light is still blinking. Thanks for sticking with my story. If you have any chilling experiences of your own, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And if you enjoy Tales of the Unexplained, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.